Hi everyone, this is Regis Giles with Girls Just Want to Have Guns. I'm here sitting down with the Chuck Taylor. Today is day 2 of our defensive handgun course. It's your beginning course, correct?
That's correct.
And I went through a process of trying to find a defensive handgun course that made sense. And I found Chuck's course because it made sense. He's not training competitive shooting techniques. He talks about efficient movements, which for me, from my jiu-jitsu training with the Valente brothers, made sense to me. So Chuck, can you add to that? First, tell my audience, because they may not know who you are, a little bit of your background.
Well, my background started out in the military, like a lot of people of my generation, and I was in special ops, special operations forces, and from there I evolved, getting out of the military and evolved into contracting with the United States government in various places in the world, again in the special operations capacity. And actually, my motivation for getting into serious training started as early as the Vietnam War, which is my first war experience, like so many guys of my generation.
Mm-hmm.
I was an officer in the U.S. Army. I was a combat officer, an infantry officer by branch, if you will. And I evolved from being a platoon leader to a company commander, and the company commander gets to write the letters home on behalf of the guys that get killed or injured. And so that caused the job, as I took over as a company commander, I got the job, among other things, of having to write the letters home to wives and mothers about guys who had gone down.
Wow.
And I found that a very difficult experience because, and it's a complicated issue because it's all psychological, but it bothered me that we weren't doing some things in terms of the way we handle our weapons and so on as well as I thought we should have been. It wasn't that the Army is terrible. It's not. They do the best they can with what they have. But it is a large organization. And I resolved right then to find better ways to do things because the better ways save lives. And it was all motivated by being forced to write these supercharged emotionally, letters to wives and mothers because people got killed. Also, they got killed following my orders,
Mm-hmm.
which made me responsible. And so that's just something you live with the rest of your life. I have no regrets over that. We did a great job. But that's what started it. And I found that there were lots of better ways to do things if you look. And I found that it's difficult to innovate in a bureaucratic environment just because of the way bureaucracies, the military, the police, the government, they are what they are. They are large bureaucratic organizations. It's very difficult to change anything, to improve on anything, because there's just so much paperwork and so many people get involved that it gets diluted to something else away from its original form almost immediately. I wrote a lot of the weapon policies for the Army in Vietnam while I was there. My training program, was countrywide renowned during 68, 69, and to the point where they actually put it in a training manual. But by the time that manual had been messed around with by X number of people within the different levels of command and advisement, it had been diluted, and which I found a little upsetting. But I was a young guy. I didn't have the bureaucratic experience to understand that was just the way the system was, that there wasn't much I could do about it. But in subsequent years, that was no longer an issue. I got out of that, and I was pretty much an independent operator, so I was not hamstrung by that. I was free to innovate. I was free to do whatever was necessary to find better ways of doing things. And I took my military experience with me because it was valid. And the old military acronym of keep it simple, stupid proved over and over and over and over and over again to be legitimate.
Mm-hmm.
And as the years passed and the techniques began to get better and better and better and better, and I didn't just theorize over a beer with a couple of buddies like a lot of people do these days. I talked to a lot of people who were the real McCoy, You
Right.
know, and it was the environment I lived and operated in. We were the real deal. And you know, I became well known in the training profession as a result, and I got into writing, and you know, the articles, the books. I've written thousands of articles that have been published. I've been doing it for over 30 years, and so I got known, and police departments began contacting me to train their teams and so on. The military, the government. I've trained DEA teams, FBI. You know, a lot of this stuff. And so I've been exposed. I've had contacts. I've had information sources
Right.
were made available to me, and so to compare notes and find better ways. And there were a lot. I found there were a lot of kindred spirits to me that had been through the same things and thought the same things that I did. And so I now had access to more information, and then I could see how product X didn't work or technique Y didn't work. Or was it salvageable? Would it work if we modified it slightly, or do we have to scrap it and start from ground zero again and just create something to replace it? And that took decades.
Mm-hmm.
But you've seen the end result, you know, this weekend. I stayed all through it with Keep It Simple, Stupid. Okay, I know how competition shooters function because I've done it. I was a world-class IPSC competitor. I was on the U.S. team twice. Okay, I understand the competitive mentality all too well. So I have background experience that nobody else in this business has. I was a warrior, but I was also a competitive shooter.
Right.
And so I can recognize it real fast when I see it. The mentality, the methodology that devolves from that mentality. And I'm not against competition if properly channeled, you know, man against man shooting and stuff, because of the stress factor is useful if it's properly utilized, because you do have a stress factor in deadly encounters that's very intense, and it's got to be dealt with. So the more exposure you have to it, the less likely it is to overpower you, you know, to cause you to just vapor lock and to be just completely overwhelmed by the event. And I found also with these sources of information, more and more and more gunfights under more and more different kinds of circumstances by more and more different kinds of people. That keep it simple, stupid philosophy kept showing up. It kept coming back to that, no matter what direction you would initially depart in towards. You'd end up back with keep it simple, stupid would work better.
From your personal experience with the gunfights you were in, right?
Absolutely, keep it simple, stupid.
How many gunfights were you in?
14. I've been in 14 now.
Yeah, and that's, I mean,
And that's
for
with
me,
handguns. With, you know, submachine guns and rifles, I've been in maybe 100 total.
yeah, and for me, audience, as someone who's looking for a handgun instructor, it says a lot when the handgun instructor has actually been in a gunfight. And
I have been shot, I have been bayoneted, and I have been blown up.
yeah,
I know what it feels like.
yeah, and like you said, you've done everything from the military aspect to the competitive shooting to the defensive shooting. You have the experience, you gain the knowledge yourself and from other experts in the field. And what would you say to another woman who's looking to defend herself with a handgun? What kind of course should she look into if she can't reach and train with you, Chuck Taylor, which she should try to? Because
Well, I'd say be careful who you train with, no matter what, because there are so many different disciplines. And I would say absolutely avoid getting around competitive shooters because their whole philosophy and perspective is completely inappropriate for actual combat, you know, confrontations. Um, Also, a lot of trainers these days they have only military or only police backgrounds, and that's what they know, and they know it well, and they do it well, but it's not appropriate for civilians.
right,
A lot of the tactics and techniques that both the law enforcement community and the military community use effectively in their environments are not even legal, much less effective tactically in a civilian self-defense environment. And then when you add in the civil liability problems, it becomes catastrophic.
and that's the other
And
thing that's great.
one of the things I ran into very quickly, and so I changed slightly the direction of some of the training. My thrust became, wait a minute, nobody is training civilians
Right.
to save their own lives. You know, we're talking about SWAT team techniques or military special forces techniques and all that. Well, in those environments, they're wonderful, but But you're not a SWAT team member. You're not a military person. You're an individual civilian in a dark alley or in your living room at night or in a parking lot somewhere, and you're forced with a situation that causes you to need a deadly weapon to defend yourself. That's a completely different problem. And then you have to comply with the law on top of all that. There's no laws in combat in a military environment. It's a free-for-all. The rules of engagement exist on paper, but you
Right.
can't enforce them, or if you could, you wouldn't have a war.
Yeah.
If you could make the other guys behave, you wouldn't have a war. So you got to fight them in order to make them behave. So it's a free-for-all. Well, tactics and techniques designed to work in that environment don't apply to you or me as civilians. And so I found the civilians flocked to this because, like you, there's almost no one was addressing it from that perspective. And today you see a lot of competitive shooters and off-duty police officers, and guys. Now that we've fought wars in the Middle East for a decade, or more really than a decade, a lot of those fellows are coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, well versed in the concepts and techniques that worked over there, but they don't work for civilians. The techniques are reflective of a completely different set of problems in a completely different environment in which they had to operate. And they're really ill-suited. They're training people, but they're teaching them what they know. And
Right.
what they know isn't appropriate for civilians in self-defense. And as you've seen, you've got the tactical liability, the criminal liability, the civil liability. There are a lot of issues here, all of which can get you in real trouble real quick.
And a lot of instructors don't address that
They
issue.
don't even, I don't think most of these fellas, and I don't mean to connote that I think they're dishonest or that they don't mean well. I think they do mean well. Teaching is hard.
Right.
You know it, I know it. And why would you, if you weren't serious and sincere, why would you bother? It's hard. It's too hard to be frivolous with. It's a difficult thing to do to be a good trainer. So I think they mean well, but then again, that's not good enough. Good intentions don't keep you from getting killed if you're learning the wrong stuff.
Right.
And a lot of them, they teach what they know, even if they're good at it. But if it isn't appropriate, what difference does it make? The problem I see also is that the beginning student has no way of knowing these things. They go in expecting, and rightly so, they're expecting the instructor to be upfront, competent, and on their side and sincere in what they're doing. Okay? If I taught SWAT team tactics, and I can do that, I have trained for the Olympics, teams for the Olympics. I mean, you've read the resume. I've done all that. But that doesn't fly when you're in a parking lot at 10 o'clock at night and a couple of guys come at you.
Right.
It's a completely different problem. You have to have techniques that are applicable within the realm of the law as well as tactical legitimacy in order to save your life. And most of these fellows have no way of knowing that because it wasn't an issue in their environment. A police officer's environment isn't the same as your environment as a civilian. A soldier or Marine's environment is totally different
Right.
from a policeman or a civilian.
Yeah, because when a civilian pulls a gun on someone else,
There are consequences.
there are even just pulling that gun from the holster.
Brandishing.
It's a huge consequence.
There are consequences for all of this stuff, and you have to know this and tailor that, pardon the pun, into the program.
Right.
You have to put that into the training program. That affects everything you do, from the